My name is Madison Wright, and at 32, I still dread Christmas parties. For years, my talent as an event planner has gone unrecognized, especially by my own family. My successful parents never miss a chance to remind me how I've fallen short of their expectations. Last December, at their luxurious annual Christmas charity gala, they humiliated me with words that cut deeper than any knife. No one would invite you without pity. What they didn't expect was how that painful moment would become the catalyst for my greatest triumph. Before I tell you how I transformed the worst Christmas of my life into my greatest victory, drop a comment letting me know if you've ever stood up to family who put you down, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of turning pain into power. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in early December. I was sitting at my small kitchen table in my modest one-bedroom apartment, scrolling through emails on my laptop. The contrast between my humble home and my parents' sprawling mansion in the wealthy part of town couldn't be more stark. My walls were decorated with string lights and simple decorations I'd created myself, while their home would be transformed into a winter wonderland by professional decorators. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw the email from my mother. Subject line: Annual Wright Family Christmas Charity Gala, December 23rd. My heart did a little flip. They rarely included me in their high society events anymore, not since I'd chosen to pursue my little hobby of event planning instead of law school like my father wanted. The invitation was formal and impersonal. Elizabeth and Richard Wright request the pleasure of your company. Nothing warm or familial, just the same template sent to all their social connections. Still, I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest. Maybe this was their way of extending an olive branch. Maybe they'd finally noticed that despite my business struggling financially, I was doing work I loved and was good at. I immediately called my best friend Sarah. "They invited me to the gala," I said when she answered. "The infamous Wright Christmas extravaganza." "Are you going to go?" Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. She'd witnessed too many family gatherings where I'd returned with puffy eyes and a wounded spirit. "I think I am," I replied, already mentally reviewing my closet for something appropriate to wear. Maybe they finally realized I'm not a complete disappointment. "Maddie," Sarah said gently, "I don't want to rain on your parade, but remember what happened at Thanksgiving? Your mom spent 20 minutes telling her friends about James's promotion while you were standing right there, and then introduced you as our daughter who's still finding her way." I winced at the memory. My brother James was the golden child. Successful corporate attorney, perfect wife, perfect house, perfect everything. "I know, but this is different," I insisted. "The gala is all about event planning. They must recognize I could have some insight." Sarah sighed. "Just protect your heart. Okay, I'll help you prep some responses for the inevitable comments about your little business." After we hung up, I scrolled through photos from previous year's galas that my parents had posted on social media. Elaborate ice sculptures, custom lighting installations, gourmet catering, all professionally executed, but somehow lacking soul. I could see a dozen ways the events could have been more memorable with personal touches. That afternoon, I went shopping. I couldn't afford much, but I found a forest green velvet dress on sale that looked far more expensive than it was. I maxed out my credit card to buy it along with simple gold accessories. I wanted to look the part of someone who belonged at that gala. That night I practiced responses in my mirror. "Actually, Mom, I just signed a contract with Brewster's Bakery for their product launch." "Yes, Dad, my business is small, but it's growing steadily." "No, James, not everyone measures success by the size of their paycheck." As I fell asleep, I allowed myself to imagine a different kind of homecoming, one where my parents finally saw me, really saw me, and recognized my value. It was a dangerous dream, but I couldn't help myself. This time would be different. It had to be. The night of the gala arrived with a light snowfall that made my parents' mansion look like something from a holiday card. Christmas lights outlined every architectural feature, and through the tall windows I could see the warm glow of what must have been hundreds of candles and string lights. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering courage and checking my makeup one last time. I had spent hours getting ready, determined to look flawless. No reason to give my mother ammunition about my appearance. As I approached the grand entrance, a valet took my keys with a polite nod. The massive wreath-adorned double doors were opened by staff wearing formal attire with subtle Christmas accents. The foyer was breathtaking. A 14-foot Christmas tree dripping with crystal ornaments and gold ribbon dominated the space, while garlands of evergreen and twinkling lights wrapped around the curved staircase. Madison? My mother's voice cut through my admiration of the decor. Elizabeth Wright was the picture of elegance in a designer red gown, her silver-streaked hair swept into a perfect updo. "You're almost late." The invitation said 7 Mom. "It's 6:55, I replied, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She turned slightly so my lips barely grazed her skin. "That dress is interesting," she said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "A bit snug around the middle, don't you think?" "Well, too late to change now. Your father is in the main hall with the Andersons." And just like that, before I'd even handed my coat to the attendant, I felt the familiar sting of her disapproval. I made my way through clusters of expensively dressed guests, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I spotted my father holding court in a circle of men in tuxedos. Richard Wright had the commanding presence of someone used to being the most important person in any room. His laugh was loud and confident as he clapped one of his companions on the shoulder. He saw me approaching and gave me a cursory nod before returning to his conversation without missing a beat. No hug, no greeting, just the barest acknowledgement of my existence. "There's my little sister," came a voice from behind me. James, with his perfect white smile and perfectly tailored tuxedo, stood with his arm around his wife, Catherine. "Didn't think we'd see you tonight." "I was invited, James," I said, forcing a smile. "Catherine, you look beautiful." Catherine, a pediatric surgeon who somehow always looked like she'd stepped off a runway, smiled warmly. She was actually the most bearable member of my family these days. "Thanks, Madison. I love your dress. That color is gorgeous with your complexion." Before I could respond, James jumped in. "So how's the party planning business book? Any big corporate events yet?" "It's event design and coordination," I corrected for what felt like the 1,000th time. "And yes, actually, I've been building a nice client base with local businesses." "That's nice," James said dismissively. "I just made partner, by the way. Dad's introducing me to the mayor later." As I circulated through the party, I couldn't help but notice several execution flaws in the event. The bar was positioned, creating a traffic jam near the entrance to the dining area. The string quartet was placed too close to the main conversation area, making it difficult for guests to hear each other. And despite the lavish decorations, there was something impersonal about the entire setup. I overheard my mother explaining to a group of her friends, "Madison is still doing that party planning thing. We keep hoping she'll come to her senses and use her degree for something more substantial. But you know how young people are these days, wanting to follow their passion." Her air quotes around those last words made it clear what she thought of my choices. One elderly woman, Mrs. Thornton, broke away from the group and approached me. "You're in event planning, how fascinating. My goddaughter just got engaged and is looking for someone with fresh ideas." Before I could respond properly, my mother materialized at my side. "Oh, Beatrice Madison only does very small events. Nothing like a society wedding. Now, have you met James's wife, Catherine? She just published a paper in a major medical journal." As my mother steered Mrs. Thornton away, I noticed a waiter struggling with a tray of appetizers that were sliding dangerously. I quickly stepped over and suggested a different arrangement on the tray. "Thanks," he said gratefully. "These keep shifting every time I move." "If you put the heavier ones in the center and create a star pattern with the lighter ones, they'll balance better," I explained quietly. My father appeared frowning. "Madison guests don't talk to the staff about how to do their jobs. It's inappropriate." "I was just helping. If you want to be useful, go make sure your mother has everything she needs," he interrupted, dismissing me as he would a child. I swallowed my response and moved away, already feeling the familiar knot forming in my stomach. The hope I'd carried into this evening was rapidly dissolving into the same old disappointment. Dinner was served in the grand dining room with 3 long tables arranged in a U shape. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier light, and elaborate centerpieces of white roses, pine branches, and gold ornaments ran down the center of each table. I was seated at the far end of one table, as far from my parents as possible, while still being in the same room. My table mates were mostly older couples I didn't know well, though I recognized a few from previous family events. They chatted about vacation homes and recent travels, occasionally including me with polite but disinterested questions about what I was up to these days. When the conversation turned to upcoming charity events, I perked up. This was something I knew about. The Children's Hospital fundraiser in February has been the same format for 3 years now, said a woman wearing what appeared to be real diamond earrings the size of small grapes. It's getting rather stale, don't you think? They need a fresh approach, I offered. Last year's auction items were impressive, but the presentation lacked excitement. They could increase bids by at least 20% with better pacing and presentation. The woman looked at me with mild surprise. How would you know that I'm an event planner? I explained. I've studied successful charity auctions and how they maximize donations. My father's voice cut in from several seats away. Madison dabbles in party planning. Somehow he'd been listening despite being engaged in another conversation. Nothing on the scale of the hospital gala, of course. It's cute that she thinks she understands these things, my mother added with a tight smile. James, tell everyone about the pro bono program you're developing. As James launched into his story, I felt myself shrinking in my seat. I took a large sip of wine and tried to look interested in my brother's philanthropic legal work. When the waiters brought champagne for a toast, I noticed they skipped my glass. A small oversight, perhaps, but it felt deliberate. As everyone raised their glasses to celebrate the season and the charity's work, I sat with an empty champagne flute invisibly excluded. After my father's self-congratulatory toast about the Family Foundation's contributions, I gathered my courage. This was my chance to share some positive news of my own. I recently coordinated the holiday launch for Brewster's Bakery. I mentioned during a lull in conversation, addressing no one in particular, but hoping my parents would hear. They saw a 40% increase in holiday pre-orders compared to last year. There was a moment of awkward silence. Then my mother smiled that smile, the one that never reached her eyes, and said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "No one would invite you without pity, Madison. Let's be honest about your little hobby." The room seemed to go silent, though I'm sure conversations continued around us. My father chuckled and added, "Your brother has real achievements to celebrate, Madison. Know your place." I felt blood rushing to my face as several guests looked away in embarrassment. The woman beside me suddenly became very interested in her dessert. The humiliation was complete, public, deliberate, and designed to put me in my place. "Excuse me," I managed to say, standing up so quickly I nearly knocked over my water glass. "I need to use the restroom." I walked as steadily as I could, refusing to run despite the tears threatening to spill over. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me flee. Once safely locked in the powder room, I gripped the marble countertop and finally let the tears come. My reflection in the ornate mirror showed mascara beginning to smudge under my eyes. I looked exactly like what they thought I was, a failure playing dress-up in a world where I didn't belong. I sat on the closed toilet lid in the powder room, my body shaking with silent sobs. The bathroom was absurdly luxurious. Hand-painted wallpaper, fresh flowers, and monogrammed hand towels, making my breakdown feel even more pathetic by contrast. Years of similar moments flashed through my mind. My mother's disappointed face when I chose a state university over the Ivy League schools James attended. My father's dismissive wave when I explained my business plan. The Christmas when I was 16 and received LSAT prep books while James got the car he wanted. The pattern was so clear. I had never been and would never be good enough in their eyes. No achievement of mine could ever measure up to their expectations, because they'd decided long ago that I was the disappointing child. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah. They did it again. Humiliated me in front of everyone. Mom said no one would invite me without pity. Dad told me to know my place. Sarah's response came quickly. "Those toxic people don't deserve you. Leave now." I'll open wine and we can watch bad Christmas movies at my place. Part of me wanted nothing more than to follow her advice, but something stubborn inside me refused to give them the satisfaction. I had paid for this dress, done my hair and makeup, and driven through snow to be here. I wouldn't slink away like I had something to be ashamed of. I splashed cold water on my face, fixed my makeup, and took several deep breaths. Then I heard voices in the hallway outside, 2 staff members talking in hushed but urgent tones. "The timing's all off," a man's voice said. "The dessert station isn't ready, but the program says the auction starts in 20 minutes, which means dessert service should be happening now." "That's not all," replied a woman. "The sound system is glitching, and Mr. Davidson says his presentation materials aren't loaded correctly." "Where's Philip?" "He's supposed to be coordinating all this, having it out with Mrs. Wright in the kitchen. He says she changed the schedule without telling him, and now nothing's syncing up properly." I eased the bathroom door open slightly to see a young waiter and an older woman in a black dress, likely the head server, looking stressed and consulting a crumpled timeline. "Great," the woman sighed. "When those two are done arguing, we'll have no coordinator at all. Philip was on the edge before this happened." I slipped out of the bathroom unnoticed and made my way toward the kitchen, staying close to the walls to avoid my parents. Through the swinging doors, I could hear raised voices. "This is absolutely unacceptable," my mother was saying. "I'm paying you an exorbitant amount to ensure this evening runs flawlessly." A harried-looking man in a suit, Philip I presumed, was gesturing with a tablet. "Mrs. Wright, with all due respect, I can't execute changes I don't know about. The auction items aren't even organized yet, and now you want to move up the presentation by 15 minutes. Don't make your incompetence my problem," my mother snapped. "Then find someone else to salvage this mess," Philip retorted, yanking off his earpiece. "I quit. Good luck finding another event coordinator on December 23rd. He stormed past me without a second glance. As I watched my mother's face contort with fury, I felt someone touch my arm. It was Mrs. Thornton, the elderly woman from earlier. "Your mother cut that young man off when he was telling me about your event business," she said quietly. "I'd like to hear more." "It's not really the time," I said, gesturing toward the chaos developing in the kitchen. "My mother is having some program difficulties." Mrs. Thornton's eyes twinkled. "So I see. Would it interest you to know that I sit on the board of 7 different charitable organizations in this city? We're always looking for fresh talent in event coordination." Before I could respond, servers began rushing past us with trays of half-prepared desserts, and in the main hall, I could hear the sound system emit a painful squeal of feedback. I stood at a crossroads. I could leave as Sarah suggested and let my parents deal with their crumbling event. Or I could step up and prove my worth, not for their approval but for myself and potentially for connections like Mrs. Thornton, who might actually value my skills. The choice was clear, even if the path forward wasn't. I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. The voice in my head that usually told me to stay small and unnoticed was silent for once. Instead, I heard my own voice, clear and determined. "I can fix this." I turned to Mrs. Thornton. "Excuse me for a moment. I need to speak with my father." I found him near the stage area, looking uncharacteristically flustered as he argued with the audio technician about the microphone feedback. "Dad," I said, approaching confidently, "the event coordinator just quit. You have a room full of wealthy donors expecting a seamless experience, and right now, that's not happening." My father barely glanced at me. "Not now, Madison. I'm handling a real problem." "I can solve your problems," I said firmly. "All of them. Let me take over as coordinator." He turned to me with a dismissive laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. This is a sophisticated charity gala, not a birthday party at the bowling alley." The audio system screeched again, causing several nearby guests to wince and cover their ears. My mother appeared at my father's side, her face tight with controlled panic. "Richard, the desserts are coming out, but Davidson says the presentation isn't ready, and the auction items aren't properly displayed yet." She noticed me and frowned. "Madison, this isn't the time for whatever you want." "I'm not asking for anything," I replied evenly. I'm offering to save your event. My mother laughed a brittle sound without humor. Please. You organize little parties for bakeries. This is completely beyond your capabilities. Actually, Mrs. Thornton's voice came from behind me. I believe Madison is exactly what this event needs right now. My parents turned clearly surprised to see one of their most esteemed guests involved in this conversation. Beatrice, my mother began, but Mrs. Thornton held up a hand. Elizabeth, I've attended enough charity events to recognize when one is going off the rails. If your daughter has expertise in this area, I suggest you use it. Unless you prefer to explain to the mayor and your other guests why they're leaving with indigestion and ringing ears instead of open checkbooks. My father looked from Mrs. Thornton to me, then to the chaos developing around us. A waiter had just dropped a tray of desserts. The sound system was still emitting intermittent feedback, and the auctioneer was gesturing frantically from across the room. Fine, he said tersely. What do you need? I didn't waste time savoring the moment. The staff's headsets, access to the event schedule and technical booth, and your permission to make necessary changes to salvage the evening. 5 minutes later, I was wearing the coordinator's abandoned headset and addressing the scattered event staff in the kitchen. I know you don't know me, but I'm going to get us all through this night successfully, I told the worried faces around me. First, we need to delay dessert service by 8 minutes to align with the adjusted program timing. Carlos, please reorganize the auction items by value, not category. It creates better bidding momentum. To my surprise, the staff responded immediately to my clear direction. Unlike Philip's frantic energy or my mother's imperious demands, I spoke to them as capable professionals who just needed proper coordination. I solved the sound system issue with a simple adjustment to the speaker positioning and microphone settings. I reorganized the auction display to create a more compelling visual story of the items, and I added a personal touch to the dessert presentation, having the pastry chef come out briefly to describe his holiday-inspired creations, which delighted the guests. As the evening's program got back on track, I noticed guests beginning to relax and enjoy themselves again. My father watched me from across the room, his expression unreadable. My mother was busy reassuring her friends that everything was under control, conveniently omitting who had taken control. But I wasn't doing this for their recognition anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I was standing in my parents' house completely confident in my abilities, and it felt incredible. The transformation of the gala under my guidance was nothing short of remarkable. Within an hour, the event that had been teetering on disaster had become a smooth, engaging experience for the guests. More importantly, it was now an effective fundraiser rather than just an elaborate social gathering. I'd made one particularly inspired decision that was paying off beautifully. Rather than having the string quartet continue playing background music that no one was listening to, I'd spoken with them during their break and discovered that 2 members also sang. I arranged for them to perform a stunning rendition of "O Holy Night" just before the auction began, creating an emotional moment that connected everyone in the room to the charitable purpose of the evening. The donation collection process had been clunky in the original plan, pledge cards on tables that many guests would likely ignore. I quickly implemented a digital solution using the venue's existing screens, creating a real-time visualization of donation progress toward the evening's goal. The friendly competition this sparked among the wealthy guests increased donations by nearly 30% compared to last year's event, according to the foundation's treasurer. My father couldn't avoid witnessing my success. I caught him watching me several times as I moved confidently through the room, solving problems before most guests even noticed them and enhancing elements that were already working. His expression had shifted from dismissive to confused, and if I wasn't mistaken, slightly uncomfortable. My mother was less subtle in her discomfort. When several guests complimented the evening's smooth execution, she attempted to take credit. Yes, we made some last-minute adjustments to improve the flow. But Mrs. Thornton wasn't having it. Elizabeth, your daughter, is quite the find. To step in mid-event, and not only salvage it, but elevate it. I haven't seen such quick thinking since Margaret Walters saved the Symphony Gala after that flood in 2019. Other guests who had noticed my sudden appearance with the coordinator's headset began asking questions. Is your daughter in the event business? Why haven't you mentioned her expertise before? Even James approached me during a quiet moment, a glass of whiskey in his hand. I had no idea you could handle something like this, he said, seeming genuinely surprised. You completely turned this around. This is what I do, James, I replied simply. What you and Mom and Dad call my little hobby is actually my profession, and I'm good at it. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I can see that now. The most satisfying moment came when Mrs. Thornton introduced me to a circle of her friends, all wealthy philanthropists who served on various nonprofit boards and organized multiple events each year. Madison saved this evening, she told them, and did it with such grace that most of you probably didn't even notice the crisis that was unfolding. Business cards were exchanged, genuine interest was expressed in my approach to event design, and potential client conversations began right there in my parents' home, the very place where I'd always been made to feel that my career was insignificant. The culminating moment arrived when the charity's director took the stage for closing remarks. The auction had exceeded its goals, the program had run perfectly after my intervention, and the guests were buzzing with positive energy. Before we conclude this wonderful evening, the director said, I want to extend special thanks to Madison Wright, who stepped in mid-event to ensure its success. Madison, would you join me for a moment? All eyes turned to me as I made my way to the stage, including my parents' shocked faces. As the room applauded my contribution, I caught a glimpse of my mother's tight smile and my father's clenched jaw. They hadn't planned on sharing the spotlight tonight, especially not with their disappointment of a daughter. But in that moment, their approval no longer mattered. I had proven my worth, to myself, to potential clients, and to everyone in that room. Their smirks and dismissive comments couldn't touch me anymore. In the days following the gala, my phone didn't stop ringing. Mrs. Thornton had shared my contact information with her extensive network, and suddenly I had meetings scheduled with potential clients whose budgets were 10 times what I typically worked with. My inbox filled with inquiries about availability for upcoming charity events, corporate functions, and even a celebrity wedding. A week after Christmas, I asked my parents to meet me for coffee. I chose a neutral location, not their house where I always felt small, not my apartment which they'd never visited. We sat at a small table in an upscale cafe, the remnants of holiday decorations still brightening the space. You've been busy, my father commented, gesturing to my professional portfolio and tablet. It wasn't a question. I have, I agreed. Thanks to the connections I made at your gala, my business is expanding rapidly. I've hired 2 assistants, and I'm looking at leasing office space downtown. My mother sipped her latte, her expression carefully neutral. Well, isn't that nice? I suppose we should be thanked for the introduction to Beatrice Thornton. I met her eyes directly. What you should be thanked for is showing me exactly what I needed to overcome in life. Your constant dismissal of my choices and abilities taught me resilience. It hurt. It hurt terribly. But it made me stronger. My father shifted uncomfortably. Madison, we've always wanted what's best for you. No, I said firmly. You wanted what you thought was best for your image. There's a difference. But I didn't ask you here to rehash old wounds. I wanted to establish new boundaries going forward. I explained that while I wasn't cutting them out of my life, our relationship would need to change. I would no longer seek their approval or subject myself to their judgment. I would attend family gatherings on my terms, and I expected basic respect for my career and choices. And if we can't agree to these terms, my father asked, his lawyer instincts engaging, then our relationship will be limited to the most basic social courtesies, I replied calmly. I've lived without your support for years. I can continue to do so if necessary. They exchanged glances, perhaps finally recognizing that the power dynamic had shifted. My success was happening with or without their blessing, Mrs. Thornton became not just a client but a mentor over the following months. Her guidance and introductions helped me navigate the world of high-profile events with confidence. By summer, I had coordinated 3 major charity galas, 2 corporate retreats, and a wedding for a local celebrity chef. James and I began rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. Without our parents' comparative framework, constantly positioning him above me, he seemed genuinely interested in my work, and even referred legal clients who needed event planning services. The most ironic twist came 6 months after that fateful Christmas night when my mother called with what seemed like physical pain in her voice. The foundation board was wondering if you might consider coordinating next year's Christmas gala, she said stiffly. Apparently, several major donors specifically requested your involvement. I smiled to myself. I'd be happy to discuss it. My assistant will send over my standard contract and fees. Fees, but your family, she protested. I'm also a professional whose time and expertise are valuable, I replied. We can discuss a family discount if you'd prefer. That December, I hosted my own Christmas gathering, not at my parents' mansion, but at my new apartment, which I could now comfortably afford. Sarah was there along with new friends I'd made in the industry, a few clients who'd become friends, and James and Catherine. My parents were invited, but chose not to attend, still adjusting to our new dynamic. As we shared food and laughter, I realized how far I'd come from the woman who had sat crying in a bathroom last Christmas. The journey hadn't been easy. There were still moments when the old insecurities surfaced when I questioned my worth or heard my mother's dismissive voice in my head. But I had finally learned the lesson that would guide the rest of my life: validation must come from within. My success wasn't defined by my parents' approval or by meeting someone else's expectations. It was built on my own talents, choices, and the courage to stand up for myself when it mattered most. When someone dismisses your dreams or belittles your achievements, the most powerful response isn't arguing or pleading for recognition. It's showing up fully as yourself and letting your actions speak with undeniable clarity. Have you ever had to prove someone wrong about you? How did you respond when faced with people who underestimated your abilities? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey of turning humiliation into triumph resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of finding strength in unexpected places. Remember, sometimes the people who are meant to support you the most can become the obstacles you need to overcome to find your true path. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to stand in your own power, especially when others try to diminish your light.